For every Virgil van Dijk, there's an Andy Carroll or Alexis Sanchez. From Luis Suarez to Nemanja Vidic, every transfer has its own crazy story. So, here are some of the most standout January transfers in Premier League history. We begin with a transfer that could have made so much sense, but just didn't. In January of 2014, Fulham, battling relegation, decided to fork out £13 million to bring in Kostas Mitroglou from Olympiakos. Mitroglou, as he was known in Greece, scored 41 goals in 92 league games back home and was expected to continue doing the same in England. A reality check was incoming because the striker struggled throughout his time in the Premier League and played only 151 minutes in total. The Cottagers were relegated and sent him back to Olympiakos on loan. Funnily enough, the Greek striker scored the winner for his team against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League. Some players just aren't built for the Premier League. The late Gerard Houllier made some shrewd signings during his time in the Premier League. So when he brought Jean Macoun to Aston Villa from Lyon in 2011 for £6 million, it was seen as a bargain. The Frenchman was at the peak of his powers and had been a vital part of the Lyon side that had humbled the likes of Real Madrid, Liverpool, Manchester United and AC Milan in the Champions League. Much was expected from the all-action midfielder. However, the hype died down quickly following a poor debut. A couple of weeks later, he was sent off for a tackle that you normally see in Sunday leagues. After playing just 5 times, Macoun left the team for good in 2013. Let's move on to some positive decision-making, starting with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang's move from Borussia Dortmund to Arsenal. The Gabon striker was expected to take his time settling in a new league, so no one expected the start to be this electric. He became the fastest player in the club's history to 50 league goals and won the 2018-19 Golden Boot. His goals also helped the team win the FA Cup in 2020. And even though he left the club in controversial circumstances, this was one hell of a January buy. In January 2009, Everton signed Seamus Coleman from Sligo Rovers for just £100,000. Nobody knew much about the young fullback, but 14 years later, the Ireland international has become one of the greatest players in Toffee's modern history. Coleman has over 400 Premier League appearances and has been the leader the club needed desperately. Similarly, in January 2020, West Ham brought Tomáš Souček on loan from Slavia Prague. Not much was known about the midfielder, but David Moyes saw something most scouts had ignored. The Czech international formed quite a pairing with Declan Rice. Souček has been among the goals since then, and even scored 10 goals in his first season of the club to help the Hammers secure a place in the Europa League. In 2019, Leicester City somehow managed to convince AS Monaco to loan Yuri Telemans. The young midfielder was considered one of the hottest prospects in European football at that time, and he proved it the moment he signed for them. He ended up with 8 goal contributions in his first 13 games, which is why the Foxes decided to make the move permanent in the summer of 2019. He also scored the winning goal for his team in the 2021 FA Cup final. Money well spent for sure. Arsenal do tend to make good decisions in January, and 2006 was no different when they paid Monaco just £7 million to sign Emmanuel Adebayor. The Togolese striker joined a team that was getting ready for its swan song, which culminated in a Champions League final run. He scored 24 goals in his first full season and became a crucial member of the starting 11. Although he left the club after a massive fallout with his teammates, Arsenal did make a healthy profit from his transfer to Manchester City. Mikel Arteta seems to be making all the right decisions when it comes to signing players, and why wouldn't he? The Spaniard was himself a great buy in January of 2005 when David Moyes brought him to Everton on loan from Real Sociedad. The Spaniard oozed class and was clearly cut from a different cloth. His presence helped Everton to an unlikely top 4 finish in the same season. He eventually went to Arsenal and a few years later became their manager, where he could be making history very soon. Let's talk about one of the worst January transfers in history. In 2011, Liverpool decided to bring in a giant from Tyneside, hoping to see the giant make a huge difference. Andy Carroll had a decent half-season at Newcastle United. He could have stayed, but the allure of representing Liverpool was too much for him. For £35 million, the Reds got themselves a player who was destined to fail. Funnily enough, he signed on the same day as Luis Suarez, who arrived at the club hoping to play with Fernando Torres. Safe to say, the January transfer window of 2011 was a mixed bag for Liverpool and Chelsea. Liverpool signed a great striker, and it was not Carroll. Chelsea meanwhile signed a striker who was playing on a different level. Coming back to Carroll, the Englishman was a spectacular failure and was eventually sold for a loss. Suarez became a huge star for Liverpool and almost took the team to Premier League glory, which was almost a guarantee had Slippy G not slipped when it mattered the most. Fernando Torres, on the other hand, became one of the most expensive strikers of all time, but he never reached those heights at Chelsea, where he dithered his way towards scoring from some of the easiest chances imaginable. Many people still attribute inflated players' prices to Chelsea buying players for fun. However, under Roman Abramovich, the Blues did make some very good purchases. One of those came in January of 2008, when they paid around £9 million for Branislav Ivanovic. The Serbian took his time to settle into the club, but then came to life and never looked back. He helped the Blues to 9 major trophies, and he even scored a dramatic late winner in the 2013 Europa League final. In January 2013, Liverpool paid Inter Milan just £8.5 million for Philippe Coutinho. The Brazilian arrived as a hot prospect, but a few years later, he became one of the most creative players in the Premier League. He was at the height of his powers when Barcelona came calling, so Liverpool decided to cash in on him. He was sold for an initial £108 million in what is still one of the best pieces of business done in Premier League history, returning to Arsenal, who have a strong scouting presence. One of those involved the initial loan signing of Norway international Martin Odegaard in January 2021. The playmaker wasn't getting many chances at Real Madrid, and Mikel Arteta saw something in him that the Spaniards hadn't. The Norwegian was a perfect fit for the sort of football the Gunners wanted to play. His first few months were enough to convince Arsenal to make his move permanent in August 2021. Neither Odegaard nor Arsenal have looked back since, and we're certain that this partnership is going to be extremely rewarding in the coming years. Manchester United fans led the trolling debate during that period, but the Red Devils have proven to be horrible buyers since then. In January 2018, United felt really good about themselves by hijacking Manchester City's move for Alexis Sanchez from Arsenal. The Chilean was involved in a swap deal that saw Henrik Mkhitaryan go the other way. Sanchez arrived as one of the league's biggest stars and was even announced with a lot of fanfare. However, Sanchez struggled horribly and never managed to replicate the form that made him such a huge star at Arsenal. On top of that, his high wages meant that moving him on was never going to be an easy task. Since then, United have been making the same blunders repeatedly. But it's not all doom and gloom for Manchester United, because in 2020, they paid nearly £65 million to sign Bruno Fernandes from Sporting Lisbon. United have been chasing him for ages, and his arrival was expected to elevate the team's midfield. The Portuguese became an instant fan favourite, and his passion and commitment were there for all to see. Bruno hasn't looked back since and is still operating on a different level. He rarely gets injured, tries to lead by example, and is the first name on the team sheet regardless of who's in the dugout. But even Bruno Fernandes isn't United's best January buy. That distinction will always go to Sir Alex Ferguson for bringing in Patrice Evra and Nemanja Vidic in 2006 from AS Monaco and Spartak Moscow respectively. Evra became part of a new breed of a United side that would continue to dominate the Premier League. He was also one of the key driving forces behind the Champions League and Club World Cup triumphs in 2008. Similarly, Nemanja Vidic shone brightly alongside Evra and captained the team to 2 Premier League titles. The Serbian became one of the finest centre-backs in Premier League history and formed quite a pairing with Rio Ferdinand. His defensive class oozed week in, week out, and how he led the team was something that only Sir Alex Ferguson would have identified when he was scouting him in Russia. When it comes to signing good centre-backs in January, only United and Liverpool seem to know what they're doing. In 2018, Liverpool made Virgil van Dijk the most expensive defender in the world by bringing him from Southampton for £75 million, a then world record transfer fee. The Dutchman did not take too long to settle into his new club. He was destined to play for the Reds, and Jurgen Klopp had a plan to get the best out of him. A year later, he was named in the Premier League and UEFA Team of the Year. Van Dijk was a driving force behind Liverpool's first ever Premier League title win. Right now, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better and more consistent defender in the Premier League. Yes, you might say that Liverpool paid a lot of money for him, but when has anyone bought a Rolls-Royce on the cheap? So guys, there were some of the most standout transfers in Premier League history. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And before you leave, make sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons, turn on your notifications, and watch this next video. Till next time,